Mark is someone I've known for a very long time. Are you familiar with Mark, Sean?
I am, yeah. I don't think we've met before.
First time for everything.
Yeah, I feel like I might be in a group with him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me just say good morning to everybody. Morning, Ray. Morning, Simon. London Lady, Soul Vanguard, Yogi Bear, Philippa, Human Creative, Penjoy, Chris Smith, Jimmy Demetrio. Are you there, Mark?
Well, I am, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, your camera is not switched on.
Okay, sorry, let me fix that.
Oh, it's a great sound, though. Sounds really good, doesn't it?
It's a DJ thing.
Yeah, what would we expect from a DJ? Nothing less, frankly. There you go. Good morning. This is Sean Ward. This is Mark Devlin. And can you see both of us, Mark?
I can, yeah. Morning,
Wonderful.
Sean. Morning, Sonia.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, Mark. It's been a sort of long time coming. I've known Mark for a very long time. We were both sort of involved in the 90s club and hip hop scene. I was a hip hop journalist. Mark was a DJ. Mark very much into the same kind of music that I was, right? Mark, dance music, hip hop, R&B, reggae, ragga, all of that. And
right.
Mark and I kind of went in quite similar and different ways. And Mark is here really to talk about his study of the music industry, which has been many years, written a series of books, Musical Truth. I believe you're on volume 3 now, Mark. Is that correct?
That's right. Just put out volume 3, the completion of the trilogy.
Very important. Volume 3, of course, which we're going to get to, but it is about the sort of manipulation the entertainment industry used for the COVID agenda, largely. Absolutely fascinating. So, Mark, listen, let's get cracking. I've got loads of stuff to fire at you. People are so excited that you're here. I want to talk about really the sort of symbology, the rituals of the music industry. I want to throw some events at you and get your feedback on those, about how you perceive them, what your research is telling you. Let's start off with the infamous One Eye Club, the Eye of Horus, where we see so many artists in this position. Please don't mistake me of being in the club by doing that, but they do that, don't they? And I've got a sort of meme here, which must have at least 50 different artists, from Lady Gaga to Madonna to TLC, well, you name it, just pretty much Jay-Z, Beyonce, you name it. Mark, what is that all about?
Well, it's a calling card to let those with the eyes to see, forgive the pun, know who is in the club, who is part of the control system that runs the music industry, the chosen ones at the very top of the hierarchy. They're basically stooges. They're doing the bidding of their corporate overlords, but they're the ones who have been chosen for the role of mind controlling the general public, basically, because that's what the music industry is all about. That's what it comes down to. It was set up as a vehicle to affect large numbers of people in terms of steering their consciousness in certain desired directions and pushing certain social engineering agendas. So when you see these artists covering one eye, it's ritualistic, it's symbolic, it's metaphysical in nature, because it represents the eye of Horus, as you say, the eye of Providence, the all-seeing eye. It's symbolic of the pineal gland, the portal to higher levels of consciousness. And these are signs and symbols that the controllers like to put out there. So you'll often see these artists covering one eye. They often cover the right eye, symbolizing that they've chosen the left-hand path in terms of where their consciousness goes. You often see them doing the so-called 666 sign, which is this thing. Mm-hmm. You see them making a pyramid, the triangle of manifestation. These are all symbols that tie into the ritualistic belief systems of the occult controllers of the industry. And when you follow the research far enough, the controllers of all aspects of organized society.
So is it your understanding that these people, they are literally chosen on signing, even before signing? Or is it a case that people are signed up to these record labels, and then the ones that appear to be more malleable, more able to control and manipulate, are then chosen to go to the next step?
Well, you have different ways in which artists are inducted into the industry. A lot of the time it comes down to family bloodlines. you come to realize that many of these chosen ones are chosen as a result of their DNA, their genealogy, their ancestry. There are certain important bloodlines where new generations of them are put to use in influential roles in society. And that can be in the music business, or it can be in the world of politics or big business, or as a Hollywood actor or a TV presenter, or whatever it may be. Then you have artists who show potential for great talent. So they might get inducted into the industry at a low level, and a keen eye will be kept on them to see whether they might suit the agendas that the controllers have in mind. And those artists that they feel could be put to use in that way will be made an offer, and they will be invited to step several rungs up the ladder. But the price that they have to pay for that can never be worth it, because this is where you get into the concept of selling your soul for fame and fortune, the Faustian deal with the devil. Great wealth, great success, great prominence, but at a very high price, which effectively is your soul. So you have spotters, I think, in the industry whose job it is to keep an eye out for those that can be elevated into these useful positions.
Interesting. So, for example, a Sean Ward would be problematic because he has his own mind, right? Mark?
Well, I like to think so.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I've got friends who tell the story of having been in bands. There's one particular friend of mine that was in a boy band in the early 90s. And he talks of a meeting that he was called to with a very famous manager in the industry. And the band was made that offer and given that promise of great success and great fortune. But it came at the price of one of the band members having to perform a particular favor for the manager in question. And that wasn't his kind of party. It wasn't how he got down. So he said, no, you're all right. We're good, thanks. And they walked out the door, and that was the end of it. Right. So they were given the option of overstepping that mark that you can never go back from.
Right.
But if at that stage you say, this isn't for me, seemingly you're still able to walk.
Yeah. They're testing boundaries, aren't they? They're seeing how far they can push you and how far you're prepared to go to.
How much you want it.
Yeah, exactly. And what you say is you're under no doubt whatsoever that this is all part of a wider agenda. It is deeply malevolent. Even though you and I and many other people perhaps used to see the music industry as glitz and glamour and fun, etc., that's not the truth at all. This is part of something much bigger. And what is that much bigger, Mark?
Well, the controllers of the music industry are affiliated with what I refer to as the controllers of organized society. So when you go far enough up the pyramid of power, you find the same groups, the same networks, even the same individuals controlling all these different walks of life. So it's not just about the entertainment industry. That's a great vehicle they have in their arsenal for mind manipulation and social engineering. But they also control the world of politics and the world of science and medicine and the military and the mass media and every other walk of life. And the idea, well, we've seen it over the past couple of years. We know where they want to take society. This is obvious. It's in their own writings. It's in their own documents. It's the New World Order master plan. And all these different components, these picture pieces of the puzzle, serve their role in getting these controllers to their end goal. But they have exposed themselves with what they've done to us over the past couple of years. They've made it so obvious what's going on. They've woken up so many. They would have factored in a whole load of collateral damage in terms of a certain quota of people inevitably waking up to the truth of what's going on. But I think they've severely underestimated the degree to which it's happened. And I feel it's going to become their downfall. But looking at the reaction of famous music makers to the scamdemic,
yes,
some questions I have are, where are all the punk rockers? Where are all the so-called rebels? Where are all the so-called anarchists? Where are all the so-called anti-establishment artists? Even DJs and MCs in the dance music scene. There's not a whole lot of them speaking up.
No.
And I think this proves my point about how utterly controlled they are, even down to what public statements they can make and what they're approved to be able to speak about publicly, because the reaction has quite frankly been pathetic
Yeah.
And it really does speak to the controlled nature of this
Yeah.
industry.
Absolutely. When you see like James Corden and Ariana Grande, for example, running around lampposts and telling people to have the jab, I mean, it's mortifying, isn't it?
Sickening.
Mortifying. It is sickening. Absolutely sickening. Sean, what are your thoughts up to this point?
I completely agree. I concur wholeheartedly. It is pathetic. I see, rappers and UK grime artists and drill artists all wearing government mandated masks in their music videos. And I'm like, do you understand that you're rapping about being like the toughest man on the street and that you don't work for the police and you're wearing a government mandated mask for a virus with a 99%? But
it's disappointing, isn't it?
It's extremely disappointing. And I think what you were saying about the music industry is the link between like the etymology word of stars. Like we worship the stars and we worship the stars of Hollywood.
Yeah.
And it all ties in, I think, to the old ancient, like you said, the one eye Horus. Yeah. But even I get nervous, even when I'm on like my Instagram live, I feel like if I do this with my hand, someone will freeze it and then it'll be on the internet. And it's just like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, we've all been there. I mean, we've all been there, but there is a distinct difference between somebody who's done a full photo shoot of this, right? And us actually, like getting caught, because like that as an okay, they do that often. I try not to these days because, well, for obvious reasons. Mark, is it satanic what we're dealing with here in the music industry?
Yes, it is. The entire industry is satanic, unfortunately. I wish it was some other way, but you have dark occult practitioners presiding over this industry and all these others, and they do adhere to these rituals. And they even put it on public display. When you come down to shows like the US Super Bowl halftime show and the Grammys and the MTV VMA Awards and the Brit Awards and even the Eurovision Song Contest now, what you find is that these events are mass energy harvesting occult rituals.
Right.
And this has even been commented on in the mainstream. I've even seen mainstream journalists say things like, wow, that was a bit satanic. Did we actually witness a genuine ritual there? Thinking back a few years to when Katy Perry had Dark Horse out.
Oh.
And there was some very dark and unsettling symbolism at that show. And then Nicki Minaj a few years before that performed an exorcism of this entity called Roman Zelensky that lived inside of her, which is almost certainly a mind control altar, because satanic ritual abuse and trauma-based mind control programming is completely prevalent throughout the industry as well. So it's getting noticed just how dark these shows have become.
Yeah.
And the reason they're used is because of the huge potential that they offer to get inside the minds and the consciousness of millions upon millions of people watching these shows. And it's an ingenious way of putting their symbolism out there in terms of things they wish to achieve, this New World Order master plan that they want to fulfill, and getting the general public to empower it through giving it their attention. So they understand the dynamic of manifestation, and they're using these shows to coerce the audience into bringing about the very goals that are going to serve their own downfall. It's evil genius.
It is. It is. I'm thinking at the moment of the Madonna halftime show. I thought that was a massive display of rituals and symbology. You remember she had the Baphomet hat and the goat's head, obviously, and a number of, I mean, that was very ritualistic, wasn't it? And wasn't she calling herself Esther, which was her altar as well, presumably?
Yeah, that's right. And she also dropped the vowels from her name for a while, so she became MDNA. What does that remind me of?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Interesting. See, the thing is, we miss these things, don't we? I mean, they're just like there. We get used to them. I basically trained my daughter from about age 9 to notice symbolism as in music videos. And by the time she was 11, she was picking them all out. So talking about symbolisms, I want to throw some events at you and get your feedback about them. And one is a recent one. Astro World, Travis Scott, people killed. That many people have said that was very ritualistic. What are your thoughts about it?
It seems to be a reboot of previous events in music history. And the most obvious one is the Rolling Stones when they performed at Altamont in December 1969, where 4 people involved in that event died. There was one guy that was stabbed to death in front of the stage while the Rolling Stones performed, and 3 other people died at that concert. And it appears to have been ritualistic in nature. There's a young filmmaker who was in attendance at that event, capturing the whole thing on film, including the murder, reportedly. And it just happens to be a young, budding individual by the name of George Lucas. You might have heard of him. So it's as if this event served as his induction into the industry. So then you think about the Astroworld event, and it's very similar in nature because you had members of the audience who reportedly died. We've had all kinds of different stories as to what led to that, whether it was drugs they'd taken, whether it was adverse effects to the arm spear, whether it was a crowd crush that caused it. But looking at the performance, you had some very disturbing imagery, including this big figure with the mouth open, which is representative of a famous picture that represents purgatory, the middle ground between this world and the afterlife. And then you've got Travis Scott himself, who appeared to go into a sort of dissociative state. Yeah. And he was mumbling and murmuring satanic stuff, and his eyes just seemed to glaze over. And the fact that it was called Astroworld, astro relating to the stars, of course. And that very same weekend, we had the death reported in the UK of a member of the reggae group UB40, said to have died at the age of 62. And his name just happened to be Astro. So what are the odds of a musician named Astro dying the very same weekend after a short illness? What could that be, I wonder? The very same weekend as you have a deeply symbolic and deeply ritualistic event called Astroworld happening out there in the United States. So it smacks of ritual behavior from start to finish.
Right. What about Whitney Houston? I've had an issue with Whitney's death, well, for the last 10 years, frankly, but the whole of it, her death, the fact that her daughter died 3 years later, both of them face down in a bath. Whitney's death, Clive Davison obviously continued with his very famous Grammys party, and her body was left floors above the party. What's your take on that whole event and her death? Indeed, do you believe the official story?
Absolutely not. It was planned for. It happened almost 10 years ago to the day, actually. I think it was 11th of February,
it
2012.
Was indeed, yeah.
And it was at the time of the Grammy Awards from that particular year. Whitney's daughter, Bobby Christina, was discovered unconscious in a bathtub 24 hours before her mother was found dead in the same hotel suite. Right. So it leads you to wonder whether Bobby Christina was intended as a ritual sacrifice to the industry, because unfortunately this stuff goes on as well. Fantastic as it may sound when you first hear it, the research bears this out. So then 24 hours later, Whitney Houston turns up dead in a bathtub in very suspicious circumstances. Clive Davis continues the party downstairs, as you say, and it becomes almost a celebration rather than any kind of somber event. And then Bobby Christina is said to have been understandably terrified of bathtubs from that point on. So how do we explain the fact that sometime later she turned up dead in a bathtub in very similar circumstances to her mother, when friends say that she never took baths anymore, she only took showers? And so she's then taken into hospital. She's put on a life support machine. She's in a coma for several weeks, I think. And they finally pull the plug on her life support system on her mother's birthday. So it's all very strange.
It wasn't on Whitney's birthday.
Reportedly, it was.
Oh, I mean, I don't even know where to go with that, honestly. I mean, and that is the thing. There'll be people listening in now, Mark. So the whole point about Rise is not to be an echo chamber, but to also attract other people who aren't necessarily in the fields that we are, to experience a sort of different side of life. Because what you and I realized a very long time ago was that there is this alternative reality that's taking place, and we're fed one narrative, but you and I delved into the alternative narrative to find out. What would you say to people listening in and saying that these people are cranks? This is insane.
I would say do the research, look into it yourself. There's a reason why my books on this are so big, because many of the pages list resources and citations. So I'm not someone that makes wild claims and can't back them up. Anytime I talk about something like satanic ritual abuse or trauma-based mind control and the way it all works, I'm going to give you those references to show where I got the information from. So anyone's invited to look into this stuff themselves. And if they approach it with an open mind, and if they have no ulterior motive and no belief system to defend, they will find it all checks out. And I've actually been very successful these last couple of years in waking huge numbers of people up to the truth of what really goes on in this world off the back of this research. So understanding the true nature of the music industry is the gateway to understanding the way in which this entire world is manipulated and controlled by certain groups and networks. So I get emails by the day now from people all over the world telling me how much my work has opened their eyes. And that's not to blow my own trumpet. It's just to demonstrate how, if you can get people interested in this subject enough, they will then go up to other levels of research and it will change their entire worldview. And that's what it's all about. That's why we do this work. We need to wake up large numbers of people to the truth of what's really going on so that the old tricks won't work anymore. Mind control doesn't work when you realize the methods that are used.
Right.
That's what we're doing here.
Interesting. Sean, is there any musical events that have baffled you, you know, famous deaths or anything? Because this is the man to ask right now.
Yeah, honestly, I've been in awe of just listening to you both talk this morning. I think the Travis Scott thing was a crazy one for me. And I was kind of a bit upset that it was so heavily pushed online, that it was rich, which I get, it was ritual, but I do feel like that was possibly the arm spear as well. And due to the excitement of it all, their heart is literally just giving up. And it's the same with footballers. But I do think that there was obviously a massive ritual side to it as well, because that whole family and connection of Travis and the Kardashians and all that is just a whole different ball game. They've literally engineered society so that women blow up their lips and their bums, and
it's horrible.
It's crazy.
It's awful. It's awful.
The so-called music is disgraceful, isn't it?
Yes.
You know,
yeah.
What passes for hip hop these days? I mean, Sonia, you mentioned that we go back to the 90s, to the golden years of that era when rap music and that whole culture just made sense. And what they've done to it now, they've debased and degraded that particular genre more than any other, in my view.
That's exactly what they've done. And a lot of the women have done it as well. I wanted to ask you your thoughts on people like Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion and everything. I mean, they're basically doing straight up porn on stage now, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even stand to listen to these, to be honest. I'm vaguely aware of who they are. I mean, my daughter walks around with this stuff blaring out of her phone all day, and it just makes me want to run for the nearest door. I just find it horrific.
I feel you. I feel you. Doja Cat. I feel you. I feel you. I know. Awful. What about some more deaths? What Prince, for example, that was all very sudden, wasn't it?
It was, and it was on 20th of April, if I recall, 2016. That was a pretty devastating year for music legends, because you had David Bowie reportedly passing away in January of 2016. Then you had George Michael turning up dead in bed on Christmas Day of 2016. And then in the middle of those two, you had Prince. And you mentioned Whitney Houston earlier, and one thing that occurred to me a while back is that if you think about who were the most successful and prominent and influential solo acts of the 1980s, so our generation, stuff that we would have grown up with, you'd probably say it was Michael Jackson, Prince, Whitney Houston, George Michael, and Madonna.
Right.
And 4 of those 5 have gone.
Wow.
And it was all in suspicious circumstances. The only one who remains is Madonna. And there she is, pushing agendas, pushing satanic symbolism, serving the controllers still to this day.
That is actually stark. That is actually stark. I hadn't thought of it like that.
They've destroyed our nostalgia. They've destroyed our memories of great music from that decade by destroying the artists themselves.
Wow, that is so deep. I mean, it is really, really so deep. So, Mark, is it your understanding that you can only get to a certain point if you're not prepared to be sort of inducted into this cult?
That's right. And it's a line that is just not worth crossing. It can never be worth it. So I feel there are acts in the industry that are there just to keep the cogs of the wheels turning around.
Right.
So they're there to make money and keep the industry moving, but they're not particularly invested in these satanic agendas. And that's the best place to remain. And my advice to any up and coming groups or producers or rappers or singers, whatever it may be, is by all means pursue success and pursue wealth up to a point, but be very wary of when that offer comes. It can be very tempting. It can seem like all your dreams are about to come true, but actually what's waiting for you the other side of that contract is your worst nightmares. So always be conscious of that.
What do you make of the 27 Club? And when I obviously refer to the 27 Club, I talk about artists who died when they were 27, Amy Winehouse, Jimi Hendrix, I think. What's his name? Jim Morrison. Yeah, who? Kurt Cobain. Was he 27? Oh, right. Okay, because people are talking about Kurt Cobain in the comments. What do you think, Mark? Is there a 27 Club or is it just a coincidence?
No, it's a very real thing. I'll have to dive off in a minute, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a large number of artists who've turned up dead in suspicious circumstances at the age of 27. So the first one was the blues musician Robert Johnson back in the 1930s. And he's said to have made a deal with the devil at the crossroads in exchange for fame and fortune, that Faustian bargain. And he got great musical talent in exchange for selling his soul. So that's the legend attached to him. So then you've got the likes of Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones, Ron Pigpen McCulloch of the Grateful Dead, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, all turning up dead at the age of 27. There are a couple where I've got my doubts as to whether they actually died when we're told they did. That's a whole different story. Jim Morrison would be one. But there's some ritualistic significance to the 27 Club in terms of the numbers. 2 and 7 does add up to 9, which is an important number, particularly in the magic teachings of Aleister Crowley, the notorious occultist who is actually linked to the music industry in more ways than you might think. He seems to be the originator of the concept of sex and drugs and rock and roll. He was into 2 out of the 3 anyway.
Right. Interesting. Now, before you do dive off, Mark, just give us a sort of parting shot of how do you protect children from this? I mean, I was on it. I monitored my daughter on the internet. She wasn't allowed on social media until she was well past 13. So I was on it, but not everybody is the same. And obviously music is a massive influencer. So what sort of guidance would you give to parents raising children in this environment?
It is very difficult keeping them away from this stuff because of the peer pressure that they get from friends and from school and from other influences in society. But one tactic I think is worth pursuing is trying to make it cool to spot the symbolism. So you mentioned that your own daughter does that.
That's what I did, yeah.
You know, kids like to be down with the latest fashions, the latest trends, down with what's cool. And they like to think they're smart. So if you can entrain your kids in what to spot in these music videos and what the agendas are that are being pushed, then they might really enjoy taking that stuff on board and feeling that they're clued up about it, right, and feeling that they're too smart to be got by the mind control and the symbolism. I think that might be a good way of
sounds like a route.
Engaging certain kids of a certain age. I've got some hopes for my younger daughter in that regard because she's quite hip to what I talk about in my work, and I think there's a lot of potential there for her to follow in my footsteps, actually.
Oh, wouldn't that be amazing? Your daughter to pick up the baton and move on with it. That would be
family
quite
legacy.
Something. Yeah, fantastic. Everybody, it is the DJ, author, researcher, podcaster, Mark Devlin. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Mark. You've literally kicked this week off with a bang. Thank you. We really, really appreciate that. Take good care of yourself. Keep up the tremendous work, Mark. It is tremendous. And have a great week. Take good care of yourself.
All right. Thanks for getting me on. Cheers, Sonia.
Thank you. Cheers. Take care. Bye.
Cheers, mate.